You can almost hear the music. Yeah, we're live, 6:55, 5 minutes before the hour. Welcome, everybody. And it seems like everybody has already watched that video. It seems to be very popular. Everyone's waiting for the truck Norris versus sloppy best cam, since those are kind of the new things that came out. I know some other guys have some newer stuff that I always get that whenever I post a video on testing. Here are some cams that everyone's been waiting for. Yeah, but why don't you test this and this and this and this? And because they're all the wrong cam, that's why I don't test them. Just so you guys know. But this was a good test, and it shows some very cool things, some things that at least I kind of knew going in what was going to happen. But the very cool stuff is when you do a test and something happens that you can't explain. And then later on, you figure out how to explain it because you do another test and figure that out. And that's exactly what's going to come up in part 2, where we show what's going on with the headers and the collector leg and all that stuff. And all that stuff is very, very cool, because an awful lot like, somewhat like cylinder heads, but intake manifolds, certainly people get wrapped up in flow. They think that intake manifolds, for instance, or headers, for instance, improve power because they flow better. That's not the case. If that were the case, then an 1 7/8" header would always make more power than an 1 3/4" header. And then, it would be better than that. It would be a 2-inch header or a 5-inch header or a 26-inch header, because it flows more, right? So it's got to be better. But that's not what's happening. The internal combustion engine, especially with cam timing stuff, is a very technologically advanced, intricate kind of dynamic equation. And it takes a while to get to understand exactly what's going on, and especially with intake manifolds and also with exhaust manifolds, especially with headers, because they have a scavenging effect. And we'll see this next video should really open everyone's eyes on what's going on in terms of scavenging. This has a decided effect. And this is the things that we found out a lot of guys, the header guys, should know this already. I'm surprised, though, having been to both SEMA and the MPMC conference, which is a big conference that they have for magazine guys that go meet with all the manufacturers. I'm very, very surprised in meeting with manufacturers at both of those events and PRI, and talking to specifically header manufacturers, but to some extent intake guys too, and talking to the actual manufacturers, the people that are selling these parts, about how much they don't really understand what's happening with headers. Like, I had a header guy tell me, yeah, the 1 7/8" makes more power because it flows more. I'm like, no, that's not how headers work. Yeah, it does. You obviously don't know anything. I manufacture headers. I make headers for a living. Our header company has been in business for, pick your number, 10, 15, 20 years, whatever, however long it's been in business. I'm like, that's all fantastic. And I'm sure guys come to you because you're a header manufacturer. That doesn't change the fact that what you're telling me is not accurate, because that's not what headers do. Otherwise, we'd all just run zoomies, and those have little or no scavenging effect. But this is very cool. And in part 2 of this, the cam stuff is awesome. Obviously, seeing guys who wanted to know, which one's better, because everyone's looking for the best cam, and the best cam, obviously, it has the name right in it. The best cam, sloppy best cam. So I want everybody to go over to Sloppy Mechanics and ask Matt where he got that name. But the thing is, there's no best cam, and we've talked about this many, many times. There's no one ideal cam. If you look at the dyno results of these two cams, if I didn't do the dyno test and show you where the difference was, it might be that when you put them in a car, other than the low speed part throttle stuff and the stall speed converter, you might not detect the difference between these camshafts, because that's the thing. And I went through this with a lot of guys with the cylinder heads. Okay, I've done multiple huge cylinder head shootouts, but when I did the LS stuff, all of the really good cylinder heads are covered by, let's say, 10 horsepower. So lots of ported heads. And the thing is, the ported heads could support way more power than, for the most part, than we were testing them on. Although when I tested on a 408, that's a lot of motor. But the thing is, if one cylinder head is 8 horsepower better than another head, again, you'd never know that if somebody didn't test it for you and show you that one was 8 better than the other. Because if you put your 408 together, and especially if you put a different camshaft in it, you might not see that difference. only when you see it actually done back to back on a dyno under a very, regimented test do you see that. And you might never know that that's the case. And honestly, if this is a 625 horsepower motor, unless you're at the track and you are counting to the second decimal point on your ET and on your and on your mile an hour, you wouldn't know that there's a difference there. And so, a lot of times arguing about that, whether or not one is better than the other, if we test it on a different combination, you might get a different result. As we see in this cam shootout, when I show you what's going on with the headers, you'll see, oh yeah, that would definitely be different. And the same thing with the cylinder heads and the camshafts and intake manifolds. When we test them on different things, you see different results. Obviously, some of the stuff carries over. But the thing is, if you're looking at something and one is 2 or 3 or 5 or whatever better than the other one relative to whatever the total amount is, that's not usually a big amount. And for me, when I'm looking at stuff like that, I'm like, oh, great. I had to go through all of that. I had to put, take a whole motor part that was still hot, because from the dyno, we've made 3 runs, and then put another set of heads on and swap the heads on and make some more runs. Great. That one's 5 horsepower different. That's like, oh yeah, we got 5 more horsepower. No, that's like, oh my God, why can't we get 20 or 30 or 50 more? That would be really good. 5 more from a head swap is not good. And the same thing here. And I kind of knew going in, when I was looking at the specs on the truck Norris cam, I was excited about testing that, because Brian's done a lot of things that people don't realize, and in a couple of years, they may come to understand what exactly went into that cam to make it do what it did. But I was excited about doing that test, but knew if you're testing a 212 cam versus a 219 cam, what's going to happen? One of them is going to make more peak power, and then the other one is going to make probably more low speed power. And that's kind of what happened. I mean, when I got to test and we saw the loss in low speed power from both of the cams, which one of them we expected more than the other. But when we saw that, that's when I thought, okay, now this is really going to be cool. When I see a 212 cam make more low speed power than a 219 cam, having tested literally hundreds of camshafts on LS motors, that's not too surprising for me. I knew going in that was going to happen. It gets so that when you do lots of these tests, that you can, like when I ran the test of the sloppy stage 2 versus the world, that's why I haven't done the turbo version of that, because it's a lot of work. And I already know what's going to happen. All of those cams made within a couple of horsepower of each other. And when we put the turbo on, they're all going to make within a couple of horsepower of each other, assuming that I can make the turbo combination repeat even with the same camshaft. So if I can do that and make it exactly repeat, which, you can, it just takes a lot of work and time and effort. And then we change cams and then it repeats within the same deal. It's just a lot of work to show that, hey, look, all these cams do the same thing. You shouldn't be worried about these different cams, because you're not really going to see very much. You should just put the turbo and turn the boost up. And that would be the lesson from the sloppy stage 2 versus the world. And anybody out there that had supplied a cam for that, please let me know. I will be happy to send your camshaft back. I don't want any of those. But the thing is that with these tests, when you know kind of what's going to happen, and then when something weird happens that you don't know, that's the awesome thing for me. That's the thing. Like when we saw this low speed power, and it differed from what Brian had done in his testing back with the truck Norris cam, because they ran it on a different combination. One, they ran it on a 5.3. It had a stock head. And Brian and I'm going to do my first live interview style video that I do will be with Brian Tooley. First of all, Brian is an awesome guy, and I've known him for a really long time, and we've done lots of cool stuff together. So it'll be good, and I hope to have lots of good guys from the industry on that. But it will be with him, and we'll get to talk about this. He actually thinks that after you see part 2, you'll understand what I'm talking about. That in addition to, because when I saw the difference in the camshafts, when I saw what was going on, we were losing low speed power, and they didn't really lose any low speed power. One, they were testing it on a 5.3 with 243 heads on it. It was a stock Gen 4 motor, Trailblazer SS intake manifold. But the other thing that they had was, and this in my opinion is the most important thing, is that they had 1 3/4 headers, and they had a full exhaust. So I'm like, okay, well, I know what, having done all of this testing for Engine Masters trying to find average power production, I know what the headers do. and I'm going to show what the headers do. We just normally run the easy headers because we're looking for, you know, the gains from most of the curve. But when we start nitpicking this stuff, we have to look in specific spots. And so we went from 1 7/8 to 1 3/4 because that's what they had used back in their testing when James was doing the tuning back there. And shout out to James. He does really good work back there. He's obviously a really good tuner, which, by the way, anybody watching these videos, I am not a tuner. I know how to make the air feel what I want and the timing what I want at wide open throttle. That's very easy. It takes, you know, 2 or 3 pulls or whatever, and then that's done. It's 3 clicks or 1 click or whatever. All that's very easy. Being able to tune and get the car to run and drive around on the track and take different gears and all, and get it to idle and all, that's a whole different thing. And I don't do that. And I get people asking me every day, hey, will you do remote tuning? Will you tune my stuff? Will you build my stuff? No, I won't do any of that. But the difference was that they had these smaller primary diameter headers. They also had a full exhaust on theirs. So I'm like, oh, well, that should tell me that looking at the situation analytically, we need to make this more like that to figure out what's going on. We also had a 5.7, which I can't change the displacement. But the one thing that Brian is going to talk about when we do this live feed deal, when we do the interview style, is that the cylinder heads that we had on our motor, the RHS heads / mast heads, I'm sure that these are mast heads, probably have big valves in them. So what you have is a lot of over scavenging from the big valve. And so as we saw because the header affects the scavenging, the valve size actually does that too. And that's a really good point. And that's why when I have conversations with Brian and we bounce stuff off of each other, it's always good because then we come up with other things to try. And that's exactly what happened on this test. And shout out to Matt over at Sloppy. That best cam, obviously, that thing is working really well. And it's a good name, Matt. I should know. But we know that either one of these cams, and this is the thing for tonight, is if you add boost, you know, guys have been asking, can we add boost to this cam? You can add boost to either one of these cams. You can add boost to the stock cam. You can add boost to all the cams. It doesn't matter what that is. We've already shown that on the 3800 where we ran a turbo and a blower and a blower and a turbo and a blower and nitrous and just the nitrous and then, you know, just all of it, and it all works. And you can do that with any of these cams. Now, the cool thing is when you're selecting a camshaft, and this is what everybody should think about, because I get the overlap question all the time. Well, that has a tight LSA, and so that's going to have too much overlap, and then it's not going to work with boost because all that boost is going to bleed out. Stop doing that. First of all, stop equating LSA to overlap because that's one thing that might affect overlap. Also, the overlap, stop thinking that overlap is bad on boosted applications because it's not, because overlap is what makes power. And stop going down that rabbit hole from 20 years ago. Put a camshaft in it that makes the NA power output and makes the power in the RPM range that you want. Do you want more low-speed power? Pick a milder cam like we had here with the Truck Norris cam. If you want more top-end power, pick a camshaft that's a little wilder like the best cam. If you want something in between, pick something in between. But pick that curve. But the thing to realize is either one of these cams, like in this 5.7, they both made well over 400 horsepower. In fact, they were getting closer to 500 horsepower NA. So how easy it is for that combination with either one of those cams to get to 1,000 horsepower? It takes almost no boost at all to get to 1,000 horsepower. So you guys can say, hey, look, the Truck Norris cam is 1,000 horsepower turbo cam, and so is the best cam is 1,000 horsepower turbo cam at the very least. Actually, they're quite a bit more than that. You could make a lot more power than that from either one of these cams. All you have to do is add boost. And so stop thinking about, I need a dedicated cam for that, because you don't. If you want to make 2,000 horsepower, then we're going to talk about a different kind of camshaft. But for 1,000 horsepower, all of these work fine. And even on a 5.3, we saw with the 5.3, that when we put the best cam, that sloppy best cam, in an otherwise stock 5.3. Now this was a Gen 4 5.3, so it had 243 heads, which, as we all know, is the best head ever made, and it had the Trailblazer SS intake, which is the best factory cathedral port intake manifold. That thing made 420 something horsepower. So again, if you want to get to 1,000 horsepower and you have basically a cammed 5.3 with a decent camshaft in it, and you're making 423 horsepower, it doesn't take very much boost to get you to 1,000 horsepower. You're talking about 20 pounds or less. And that's pretty easy to do with the right kind of turbo. So again, that even on a 5.3, even on just a simple cam 5.3. But the thing is, there are lots of those cams out there that will do that. Not just the Truck Norris, not just this best cam, not a sloppy stage. I mean, a sloppy stage 2, not just that one, not just a 454 cam. Almost all of these cams from Texas Speed or Cam Motion. Steve, shout out to Steve out there. He does great stuff over Cam Motion. The stuff from Comp, from VTEC, from anybody. All of those cams that would put you, 400 horsepower or better, to get to 1,000, you just start multiplying it up. It's very, very easy. That's how you should be thinking about cams. And that's one of these things that it showed me. I'm working on the video for tomorrow on the headers and stuff, and all of that will work out really good. I just was talking earlier to James Short over at Brian Tooley Racing, and we're talking about L83 stuff, which I'm very excited about because boosted L83 stuff. That needs to happen. I have an L83, and they had a bunch of them. Apparently they sold them all out. I have mine, and I'm willing to sacrifice it because you know how I do it. I don't even care. I want to get that back to the guys at Brian Tooley because he can tune it back there. They have a Haltech or something that they can run the variable cam and all that. And so we can run that back there, and I want to run that under boost because they also have upgrades for the fuel system for the L83, and we can run a turbo setup on that. And then also they can run as a combination the DI and port injection. So hopefully we can get to some fairly big power with a stock bottom end ring gapped. Heck, they've got some good cams back there, ported heads, with maybe an MSD or an LS2 or some kind of intake manifold on there. We're looking at some fairly serious power because they've made way over 500 horsepower. In fact, more like 550 or 560 with an L83 with the right heads cam and intake manifold. And I don't think we need to go there, but even if we're at like 525 or 500 or 525, and then we start multiplying that with boost, you get to some pretty big numbers with a turbo when you're starting at stuff that makes 500 horsepower. So that'll be a lot of fun. I'm excited about the L83 stuff. So that's my discussion for tonight. Let's see what you guys got going on. Let's see, racing. I started watching David Vizard too. I really want to try his torque program. So if you guys have not taken a look, make sure that you go over and watch David. He's been doing this for years. He's done all kinds of great stuff. He's right now doing some ported 2.2 liter Dodge heads for me, because we're going to put them on. We're going to do some testing with it on the engine dyno, and he did some port molding with it, and they're just awful. So it's good. The Truck Norris is not a VVT cam. The port molding, if you take a look at the mold that came out of those ports, you're like, oh yeah, that's why it does not work very well, because that mold's terrible. You take it out, and you're like, that mold had to be wrong. There's got to be something going on there. That mold cannot be what that port looks like. I was hoping, I had my fingers crossed, but it is. The nice thing is that now David can, work his magic and make it work really well. Let's see. I think a 6-liter L96 would make a very similar torque curve compared to the 5.7. I think the 6-liter is going to have much more low speed torque than a 5.7 does. Turbo LS, do I need high pressure, high volume, or high pressure and high volume oil pump? You don't need either one of those, actually. It depends more on what the clearances are for your bottom end. If it's all stock clearance, it's usually fairly tight. You can run a high volume pump if you want. If you're worried about the turbo, if you're feeding the turbo like right off of the block, or if you're feeding it from behind, you're feeding it after the rest of the bottom end gets pressure. So it depends. Let's see. I want to ask Richard, who are the OG cam grinders, Comp Cams, Crowder, and who else? Schneider's been doing it for a long time. Clay Smith has been doing it for a long time. Urson's been doing it for a long time. Holder, would you test a Big Bang cam grind for an LS? I don't understand what that is. The Big Bang is not a camshaft. It's finding out how much power the stock bottom end will take, and that's irrespective of the camshaft, actually. VVT will make a smaller cam run higher in the RPM by retarding the cam, but those two cams are so similar you won't know the difference. Keep the VVT. Just watched a YouTube video where a guy cut and welded 2 LS heads to fit them on a Ford 300. That's a good idea because those heads obviously are the stock heads, not really that good. Just a heads up in case you didn't know, the mic has been crackling a little bit. I wonder what's going on. Probably from when I was doing the other style of video, I had a lot of gain on it, and so that should be cured for tonight. Wonder about cam ramp influence on dynamic compression ratio regarding boost. I don't really understand the question. You shouldn't worry about that. What you should worry about, how you should be thinking is NA power curve and then add boost. Don't worry about dynamic compression. Richard, what 2.2 head are you getting casted? The early one. This is from a 9 or from an 84 or 85. Do you think Dave will be filling in those 2.2 ports somewhat? I don't know that I don't think he's going to be doing any welding on it that I know of. Tim, I have a 1970 Mustang 2V Cleveland, nice, with 4-speed rear, 350, 9-inch. I'm sure what cam was stock looking. I have some Cleveland videos up, but if you want just a driver, something small, something with 224 degrees or less of intake duration at 50 would be good, is kind of what I'd be looking at for that. How can I out my money in your pocket? Theo, that's a good question. I always like to hear that. Well, we have super chats here, so you could put some super chats money in if you want. It's not necessary. I don't have the merchandise line set up yet, but that is coming. Iski cams, yeah, at Iskandarian, yep. Can I run the Trek Norris cam with an LSA supercharger? Yes, you can. It would make a lot more low-speed power than either the LSA camshaft, which came from the factory, or the LS9 camshaft. It would be a lot better down low. Let's see. A big bang cam grind refers to making companion cylinders fire together. It can be done on overhead cam V8s by rotating the cams one bank 180 from their normal position. That doesn't really sound like something I would be too interested in. I've heard of Clay Smith. Do they have anything worth looking at, or should I go Crower? I don't know what you're trying to do, what engine you're trying to do it with. The Clay Smith cams that I've tested for the LS stuff they've all worked really well. 706 versus 317 heads for a 6-liter. Again, it depends on what you're trying to do. If you're running boost on them, either one of those heads will work very well. You can make more. You can top out whatever the turbo that you're running, unless you're running 2,000 or 3,000 horsepower with the turbos. Either one of those heads will work. The 317 heads will obviously have lower compression. If you're trying to get more, torque, the 706 head will work good, but you're going to have to tune it because the compression will be higher. Rocker arm ratios on stock cams versus small aftermarket cams. Rockers, I wouldn't do rockers only because you're going to have to change the springs if you put rockers on it anyway, and a cam is going to be a much better way to go because you'll get more gains with a cam than you will with rockers. K-Series with VTEC killer cams is a nice choppy idle. There would be no reason to get rid of VTEC in a Honda engine. You should keep that. Unless you're trying to make 6 million horsepower and you just want to have the other cams in there so that you only have one set of lobes in there. But otherwise, you should have VTEC in there. That's the great thing about it, is because you have more average power production. You get the turbo spooled up. It works way better. Too bad you couldn't put an LS head or 2.2. That would be really nice. Those heads are so bad. Is that the original head to the GLH? No, it's not. It's another head that I got. I have the head, the original head. There's no original head to that GLH. The GLH came, I got it with a 2.5, so it has a later head in it. I also have an 84 motor that has that head that's been repaired. This is a different head altogether, but it's an early one. Jordan, keep or delete VVT. If it's a daily driver, just keep VVT. It works really well. If you want more power, then put a camshaft in it. Would a cam upgrade make a difference on a stock intake, stock exhaust LQ4? Yes, dramatically so. Take a look at the video I have up. I ran the BTR truck cam, stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3, both with long tube headers and with stock exhaust manifolds, because everybody was saying, yeah, but it wouldn't do anywhere near that with stock exhaust manifolds. Guess what? It does exactly the same thing. It just starts slower because the motors make less power with the stock exhaust manifolds. It starts slower and ends lower with the stock exhaust manifolds, but you still get gains with the cams just like you do with headers. It doesn't just work with headers and not with stock exhaust manifolds. That would be ridiculous. Brandon, Richard, for my 03 Cobra, which bank is best for wideband 02, or should I get a dual bank? Either one of them will work. We alternate them all the time. Are you going to have 5X t-shirts? that's a lot of X's. Richard, please don't call those 3800s ported. The ones that you got are scratched with a sanding roll. They are technically ported, but just not, apparently just not well enough. I just want adjustable rockers on my LS. You can do that, but they're heavy and they cause valve float. But other than that, they work just fine. At what horsepower level do you have to worry? What horsepower level using nitrous do you have to worry about ring gap? I don't know. We've run lots of nitrous with not checking ring gap, but we ended up blowing up the motor. So maybe that's a lesson learned. I would put ring gap in it. We run 100 shots all the time without doing it. I know that everybody wants to be lazy and not do it. If you're taking the car out and racing it with nitrous, you should take it apart and do ring gap in it. MS3 cam on LFA 6-liter, same gains as cam on LS2. I would think so. I mean, if it's on a 6-liter and it just depends on what you're starting with. The LS2 cam might actually be better than the LFA cam. So you might not gain as much on an LS2 as you would, relatively speaking, on an LFA. I don't know what the cam timing is on the LFA. When you hit 1,000 wheel horsepower, the K24 will drop valves because of the VTEC cam? That's not right. Have you ever tested aftermarket LS exhaust manifolds? I've tested shorty headers, which is probably as good as you can get compared to a stock exhaust manifold. A stock exhaust manifold or an aftermarket exhaust manifold like a Holley or Hooker or whatever, there are other people I think that make them. You're going to get a flow change, but the flow from the stock exhaust manifold isn't really limiting power. Like when we put shorty headers on there, we gain very little. You gain more from a long tube header, not because of flow, but because of scavenging. And aftermarket exhaust manifolds don't do that because they're not long enough. What do you think if an LS had a needle bearing crank like a Honda? I don't think it's necessary. 4-cylinder turbo, would wasted spark be okay, or individual coils? We've run lots of 4-cylinder stuff without individual coils, but I do like having them, like on the Honda applications, and we're running that even on the 6-cylinder GM motor too. I'm looking forward to the 2.2-liter being on the dyno as well. I have lots of testing. I have lots and lots of testing planned for that, just even more so than the 3800. Why do people increase the rocket ratio? I'm sure that's rocket ratio, right? If power increases from the ratio increase, doesn't that mean that a bigger cam is really what's needed? Yeah, I look at it that way. If we put rockers on a motor and it gains power, like you will gain power when you put rockers on a stock LS motor, because the motor has everything else that it wants, and it wants more camshaft. As we see when we put more camshaft in an LS, it picks up a lot of power. So it will pick up power from rocker ratio as long as you have enough spring rate, because otherwise you'll go into valve float almost immediately. So that's a good indicator. But by the same token, we've run rocker ratios. We've changed rocker ratios from 1.5s to 1.6s, for instance, on Chevys, and not picked up anything. So maybe it's an indicator sometimes, and maybe it's not. Truck Norris or VVT stage 2. I don't know who's VVT stage 2 you're talking about. Dual bank widebands will drive you nuts. Ask me how I know. They're almost required on Mopar since you have to tune both banks individually. The VE maps always look different. Why would the maps look different on the different banks of the motor? They should be the same. If the intake manifold has the same runner length, the heads obviously have the same runner length. Why would they be having different air fuel ratios? And why would they require different tunes on them? Dyno LV1 V6 and see if the piston rod are the same as the LT motor. We want to do an LV3, I think, is the one that we're going to do with Brian Tooley. Any plans to test these cams in a 6.2? There's no reason to run them on a bigger motor. It will do the same thing. What kind of power do you expect from an LQ9, 317 heads, Trek Norris cam, long tubes, Trailblazer SS? Take a look at the videos that I have up on the 6-liter stuff. You can get a pretty good idea from the truck cams that we ran on the 6-liter. It's not going to have nearly the low-speed power, but a stage 3 truck cam might be comparable in terms of peak power. Tim, what ring gap tool would you recommend? The one that we use is from the guys at Total Seal, and I love it. It has a dial indicator on it, and lots of guys I think now have copied it and knock it off. Maybe they did, I don't know. But it works really well, so we can dial in how much we want to take off, and it seems to work pretty well. The GLH stock made 146 horsepower. What horsepower are you hoping to make with a ported head and other mods you plan to do? Well, Big Belly Racing, awesome name. It's going to make more than that when we run it on the engine dyno because it's rated at a given power output with from the factory with everything on it. All the accessories, the full exhaust, the full air intake, air box, all of that stuff with the factory tune, the way that it's run in the motor, although it's run on an engine dyno, but it's run the way that it runs in the car. We're not running it that way. So it's going to make a lot more than 146 horsepower the way that we run it when we're starting at the stock boost level. I'm not trying to make lots of power. What I'm trying to do is demonstrate what happens when we do specific things. So here's what happens when we tune this thing, because I'm going to run it with an aftermarket ECU. We're going to run it with a Holley. So right off the bat, it's going to be better than the stuff that the guys are running with the factory ECUs. So we're going to run it with 7 pounds, non-intercooled, stock head, stock cam, stock 2.2 short block, all that stuff. And then I went through in one of the other videos a whole series of tests that we're going to run. We're going to run it at all the different boost levels. We're going to run it with an intercooler. We're going to run it with the E85. We're going to run it with different camshafts. We're going to run it with ported heads. We're going to run it with different turbos, all the different intake manifolds, all kinds of stuff. I want to show what each one of these things do and what they're worth. It's not a build-up trying to make lots of power. Lots of guys do that, and most racers do that, but that's not what my channel is. My channel is telling you, here's what happens when you run this camshaft. Not, I'm going to make 1,000,000 horsepower. That's not as informative for me. What would be the best LQ9 setup? If you want to make 600 horsepower NA, take a look at the video that I have up on the LS Cathedral Port intake test. That motor made about 600 NA. It's not easy to do. It's hard to do to make 600 horsepower flywheel from a 6-liter. You can do it with short runner intake manifolds and lots of camshaft. It's hard to do with a stock bottom end where you don't have valve relief to put lots of camshaft in it. But it becomes not a nice thing to drive around. 600 horsepower with a turbo is like any motor with a turbo on it. Zach, I love you and the Engine Masters guys. They are good guys. You guys made me buy a 440. Perfect. That's right up Dulcich and Freiberger's alley and run it through a first-gen Ram. Let's see. Would you choose a truck Norris cam over a stage 2 VVT cam on a 6.2 liter? You get to choose the cam that you want. I just provide you with the information. I've never run a VVT cam, so I don't know what it does. So I can't really make that recommendation. Do you know of a good rocket arm shootout video? No, I don't. I thought ratio rockers only change the lift, not the duration. The rocker changes primarily lift, but because of how long that lift is happening, it actually effectively changes about 2 degrees of duration too. Cameron, the GT45 is good on the 3800. What would be good on a maxed out 3.4 liter, or would you recommend something smaller in an S10? Well, I don't know what you mean by maxed out. Do you have cam? Do you have a cam for the 3.4 liter? Do you have ported heads? Do you have a ported in? Do you have a better intake manifold? Do you have a good exhaust? I don't know what you have on there. A 3.4 liter in the power range that I just ran, the 3800, meaning 600 horsepower, I wouldn't pick the GT45. I would pick a GT35 82, and it'd be a much better choice. And for the 3.4 liter, it would definitely be a better choice. Is there much of a difference between the BTR Stage 2 truck cam and the BTR Stage 2 V2 truck cam? No, there's not. Not in terms of power. Now I want to know how many different engines and LS head can be adapted to. Well, if you're clever with your machining tools and welding, apparently a lot. Okay, the LV1 doesn't have DOD and the LV3 does have DOD. Okay, cool. Do you think the new 2.7 Silverado motor would be eventual other guys? If it's new, probably not. I won't be doing a lot of the newer, more expensive stuff. We're doing lots of older stuff, and not a lot older, but you know, it's still modern enough. Have you ever tried the trick flow head and cam kit for the 462 valve? I have. If so, what kind of power does it make on a stock bottom end? I see it claims 390 horsepower, 390 foot-pounds. That should be fairly easy to do. We've made 400 horsepower with 2 valve motors a lot with heads cam and the PI intake manifold. So that should certainly be possible. The trick flow heads are very good, much better than a ported stock head is. Everybody hit the like button right now. Just stop what you're doing and hit the like button. Otherwise, you're going to get put in timeout. I'm going to show you what timeout looks like. Here's what timeout looks like. Okay, that was timeout. 600 NA and you'll be happy. That's a lot. What's usually the horsepower difference between a 5.3 and a 6.0 if they have the same cam and head package? Miguel, I'm glad you asked, because lucky for you, that video is up. I ran a stock 4.8 and a stock 5.3 and a stock 6.0, and you can see exactly what they do. On our test, the 5.3 made like a stock one when we get them from the wrecking yard. If it's a good one, makes like 355. A stock 6 liter makes 400. Is anyone making manifolds to add port injection to the LT motor? Yeah, lots of them. Holly made those years ago, actually. They had their high ram. Ricardo's in the house. Nice. The compound 3800 work best? No. The turbo 3800 works way better. Your mic is peaking pretty bad. Come on, Mike. What are you doing? What's up with that? What cam specs have the most influence on top end? Say 6 liter 6500 cam versus 8500. The duration normally is what changes the RPM range. What horsepower limit would a 7665 turbo have on a 5.3 with a stage 1 turbo cam? Currently running 10 pounds of boost, but thinking about upgrading to a 7875 for the season. A 7665 will probably run out of hot flow side. A 78, 75 is getting near the 1,000 horsepower range. I know, Graham. You always hit the like button. I can count on you. What two-step are you running on the mic? I wonder if I can adjust that. I don't think I have anything open. Let's see. How'd you like being on mute? Might drop your gain down. I don't know how to adjust that though. Let's see. No. Nope, that's not working out. I think I have to adjust that when I'm starting out. Is it worth rebuilding an eBay turbo? It's better just to buy another one. Have you ever done LT5 from the 90s ZR1? I haven't, but VTEC has one where I've been trying to get them to run it for a really, really long time. 7665s are meant for twin systems. That would make more sense with that small of a hot side. I'm here for all the dumb questions with no answers. Well, you've come to the right place, obviously. Have you seen the Trick Flow 78cc top end kit for the 440s? What your opinion? If you've seen it, I have a top end kit from Trick Flow for a 440. I haven't put it on anything, which I need to do. Any insights on why the 6.2 stroker only made about 25 horsepower more than the stroker 5.3 you had on the dyno? Are you talking about your stroker or mine, or what's the question? What do you prefer for a street car? High duration and medium lift, or medium duration and high lift? That's not the only two choices that you have. I just pick the right cam I pick the cam that does the thing that I want it to do. Benjamin, holy cow! I finally made it to a live video. Wish I had a pickup truck bed full of BMW M50 parts to drop off for some destructive testing. Any plans to do a VVT cam shootout? I don't have a way to control that. Only the guys that Brian Tooley can run VVT Gen 3 and Gen 4 cams and Gen 5 cams too. Does E85 work well with water to air intercooler at 25 pounds of boost? Yes. Justin, which 416 are you talking about? Randy, have you tested the LS4 intake? Yes, I have. As a matter of fact, I have a video coming out after I do the video on the headers. I'm going to do the LS4 intake video, which I'm sure guys are waiting for that too. It's terrible, at least according to this test it was. Six-liter, 78, 75, no playing games, max power, please. No, go watch this, please. I don't know what you're talking about. A 7875 is like 1,000 horsepower turbo, so you can make 1,000 horsepower with that turbo. Dan, 5 out of 3 people have problems with fractions. At least that. Any idea what horsepower was made using a 2.2 using the old B&M supercharger? I don't know if I've seen a test on that. It's going to be a lot less than a turbo. The supercharger's not, as we saw, the supercharger's doesn't keep pace with a turbo. Zach, I do want to build a 440 base motor, probably some 500-inch kind of thing. Dan, you want the 5-force race cam? That's good. That's what I was telling people when I saw, and which I really like them. I like the fact that GM and Ford and Dodge have made, retro modern versions of these muscle cars, the 69 Camaro and the Mustang and the Challenger and stuff. And I, they used to, back in the day, they had 7/8 scale cars. Well, these are like 9/8 scale cars. They're 9/8 scale cars of the Challenger and 9/8 scales of the Camaro and the Mustang, because they're so like, we look back and think, man, that 69 Camaro thing was big and heavy. No, park it next to a new one and see what happens. It's not even close. Richard, if there was a better cam to run that would give me the same power with the better streetable manners, wife doesn't like it. Seems like these cams are all the same to 4,500. Don't ever. So people know for future use, when you're asking a question, don't ever put what are your thoughts or thoughts. Don't ask me like open-ended, either rhetorical or essay questions. Ask a question. I'm not gonna expound for a half an hour unless I'm at like happy hour and horsepower with my wife. I'm not going to expand on that. That's just not, it's not good use of time. Would you use a 440 source stroker kit? No, I'm going to get mine. Well, maybe I'm going to get mine from Summit. Richard, when is the 3800 Big Bang test coming? Haven't you seen enough 3800 stuff? I mean, everybody was complaining that there was just too much 3800 stuff. Dan, your comment has been faded, but clever nonetheless. 9/8 scale. That's how I like my ladies. Nice, Zach. Kevin, I have an 04 Pontiac GTO cammed with ported 241 heads, makes roughly 390 horsepower. How much can I safely get, and what are the mods I can do for max power? Should I say best comment? Best, that best word. That's why that cam has that name. If an 04 Pontiac, if it's a 241 headed motor, it's a 5.7. I don't know the GTO designations. I know that they had 5.7s and 6.0s. The 241 is probably a 5.7. You can make the motor bigger. You can put more camshaft in it. Properly ported 241 heads can actually flow very well. They can flow as well as a 243 or a 706 or 317 head if they're ported properly. So I don't know how well they're ported, but the good combination is a fast intake manifold, ported heads, some kind of 230-ish camshaft in it, and long tube headers. What's the most cost-effective blower for a C6 Corvette? I don't know that there is a cost-effective application for a C6. I'm looking forward to the J-Series Honda testing, and I can't wait for Jimmy, my buddy, to get his Acura NSX up on the dyno with that J-Series in it. It's all stock, so it'll be really cool. And the cool thing is, and because Jimmy is he's the guy that owned HP Performance, so we've done lots of stuff together. We did a road trip together. He's like good people. He's awesome people, and he has that J-Series in an NSX, and he's such a like car guy and a dyno guy that he's made his system so he can pull the turbo off and make an NA exhaust so he can run the motor NA on the chassis dyno and then put the turbo on, and it comes on and off fairly quickly. So we can do all that, which is awesome, which is exactly the way that I would do that. So I like people that are like that, and Jimmy is that kind of guy. He's an awesome guy. And so he's going to run it NA on the chassis dyno, run it with boost on the chassis dyno, run it with the 85, and do all that stuff, and it'll be cool stuff. It is, Vern, it is time to start the Nova project. Nova project, I'm thinking big block and turbo 400 would be the best way to do it. Have you done any testing with a 3.6 liter on a Colorado? No. Well, I have done with, if that's the 5-cylinder, I have done chassis dyno testing with that. What's your go-to water meth kit? I don't really have one. I've tested the Snow Performance Boost cooler stuff, and that's all worked the way that it should. Mopar Black Knight. Wow, I follow Lunar and Uncle Tony's Garage. Uncle Tony went ape on the Lunar Outlaws Garage. Lunar called him out for the no-name nationals for the stuff that he pulled on him a year ago. Was that the 318 that he built? Because not very impressive 318 building from what I saw. And I hope that they settle it on the track, which would be cool. Admiral, I'm shooting for 1200 wheel horsepower twins on my 2V. What turbos should I run from VS Racing? He's probably got some 366s or something like that that should work really well. What are you running at the YouTube Nationals? The GLH? That would be cool. It'd be cool if that thing was like an 11 or 10 second GLH. Charles, even contribute $30 to save the 3,800 fund. All you have left is a big rank, right? That's what I was going to talk to you tonight before we have about 90 minutes before I've got to get off. But on the 3,800, what else do you guys want to see? I want to put it back together with the ported heads, hopefully, that Eric would do. And honestly, I could run it with the heads that are there because it's for a big bang thing. That thing will make enough power. We're already on track to do that. But I want to put a better camshaft in it and a different intake manifold, and then I want to turn the boost up, and I want to see what it'll do. I don't know what else we really need to do. I'd like to have a good set of ported heads on it and actually show what those do. And I'd also like to have the right camshaft in it. But after that, I kind of want to just go up and boost. I want to run ice water like we do in all the newer Big Bang, excuse me, on all the newer Big Bang stuff, and run ice water with a turbo and turn the boost up. And I'm pushing back on my screen because I'm leaning back. I want to just make lots of power. And I think that getting to some fairly big numbers is not going to be hard, actually. Oh, yeah, and Cometic head gaskets and ARP head studs. Corey, working on a 5.3 Gen 3.5. Nice, because, a Gen 3 or Gen 4 isn't enough. We have to have them in between. I guess it has Gen 3 dish pistons and press fit. I'm sure you mean Gen 4 rods. What is the max horsepower torque rating for Gen 4? Take a look at the Big Bang stuff. We made 1,300 we made 1,482 with Gen 3 stuff and went way over 1,500 with Gen 4 stuff. So I think that the strength of the stuff is not going to be the problem. You're going to have a problem with your tuning and all the other stuff before you have a problem with that. If we Big Bang a 454, we also need a Big Bang of 460. That seems reasonable. I just want to put boost on a 460. I do want to do a turbo rotary. That's very good. Hey, can you build an engine and I can test it on the street for you? That seems like a heck of a deal, right? An 8.1 Big Bang. I don't have any interest in doing an 8.1 Big Bang. I do have interest in running an 8.1 and doing testing with it, though. Does it help to run twin turbos, one a little smaller than the other on a V8 to slow turbo lag? No, you're going to get what you're going to get depending on how they're connected is you're going to get one trying to feed out of the other turbo. A J series is definitely planned for the engine dyno. There are things for those J series because when you look at a motor to run on the engine dyno, run a series like this 3800, you want something ported heads. You can do that with kind of anything. You'd like to have different intake manifolds available, ones that you don't just have to make because it's very expensive and time consuming. And you want to make something or test something that's available for other people to do, not something that I just, did as a custom deal, because then nobody can reproduce it. Or if they could, almost nobody's going to do it. So you want heads, you want ported heads, you want intake, you want cams available for them too. And then obviously turbo stuff, and the 3.5 liter, 3.2 liter, 3.7 liter if you get a newer one, although I don't like the common head deal that they have on those. That's definitely on the list. The 2J is not on the list. There's a million things done to 2Js, and there's guys making multiple thousand horsepowers with those. But the 4200 Atlas I need to get back onto. Would you be interested in advising a champ car team running a 1978 G-body Chevrolet with Gen 3 power? I don't know how much information I could give them. Have you done any testing on Nissan L-Series motors? I have owned and currently own. I own a 1971 240Z. I had a 260Z, did lots of stuff with it, and have done lots of testing with those motors. Big Belly Racing, have you ever heard of James Rees? His street legal GLH has dipped into the 9s. You say street legal, it's not a legal car, it's not emissions legal, but I have seen it and I know which one it is, and that's very fast. I mean, that's really, really fast. At least I've seen the videos of it. 2JZ versus 4200 is not, that it just becomes expensive. A 4200 makes more power than a 2J does, a lot more power. It makes more power stock. It makes more power NA, and so it makes more power at any given boost level. The thing is, like, how strong ultimately are the blocks, I guess, would be the question. And I don't know on the 4200. Quick change turbo, that's right, like quick change rear ends, that's it. Raylar does do the stuff for the 8.1. Dart also does stuff. I think that they do a block for it. They either do a block or heads for it. A Big Bang 4200 would be good. I would like to get to 1,000 horsepower with a 4200. That would be cool. Yeah, Raylar is not, that's not cheap stuff. I won't be buying any of that. What is the safe lift you can get out of Vortec heads by changing to VI springs? The spring, you're going to run into coil bind with a spring, but when you change that, you still have retainer to seal problems, and so you have to cut the seal down to get more lift. I do testing on big block Chevys, lots and lots of testing. There's lots of videos up on that. A VG30 would be good, but again, we've never run one on the engine dyno. Yeah, there's lots of big block videos up. The motor that I want to run is I want to run my little 3-cylinder Chevy Sprint motor on the dyno. I also have an RB25. I don't have an RB26. Our Admiral said, I bet the 4200 should have a bigger power ceiling than the stock 2J. If I had to guess, the 2J would start getting iffy with a stock short block in the 900 horsepower range. I don't know. I don't see guys running stock stuff, really high horsepower 2Js. You see a lot of guys running monster power, and they call it a stock block, and the only thing that still remains there is the block. I see guys doing that, but the 4200 is bigger. It's a lot bigger than the 2J, and it makes a lot more NA power. I don't know how the head flow on a 4200 is compared to an imported form. I would imagine it's pretty good compared to a 2J. I don't know how the block strength is. We know in a 2J, the block strength is very, very high. I don't know how it is on a 4200. So I don't know if it will go into the 1,000 to 1,500 horsepower range. Stacy, Iron Block 6.2 with an 823 head, CNC ported no less. With the Truck Norris camera, the best cam work best. I don't know what you're trying to do with your 4-wheel drive. With the best cam, you're going to need a converter probably, even on a 6.2. Maybe not on a 6.2, but I would probably do that. The best cam works really well on a 6.2, more so than on a 5.3. The ported heads, if you want lots of power, you're going to want camshaft in that thing. What engine management do you prefer? The ones I run with on the engine dyno are Holley, HP, or Dominator. Fast sometimes, the MS3 Pro. I don't like one more than the other. I just like one that works, and that one that can change the air fuel and change the timing. And in the case of the MS3 Pro, change the cam timing. That's all that I care about. Possible for LS springs on VTEC heads with no machining. I don't know. You need to run like a 400 or 420 lift cam. It's not a spring problem. It's the retainer to seal clearance problem. Let's big bang the sprint motor. That would be good, huh? Have you ever had any experience with P1 SC Pro Charger kits on an LS? Yeah, we've run lots of, there are lots of Pro Charger blower videos up on LS motors. Somebody said test the 632 big block. That's way out of my price range. I'm going to post videos on the Nova after I do videos on the Nova. Are V-band turbine housings inlets better than T3 and T4? I don't think so. Sometimes they're more convenient for, I like them because you can rotate them and fix the turbo where you want it. And sometimes that's better than a fixed mounting location for a T3 or T4 flange. Chevy for life. Okay, this is the last question for tonight. 5.3 liter to 383 stroker. So you're putting a 4-inch stroke in it. Reliability and engine noises. I don't know about that. I've heard the stroker crank pulls the piston too far out of the cylinder. On a 4-inch stroke, that's not as much of a problem on a 5.3. I wouldn't go any bigger than that. Some guys go 4.100 and 4.125. That pulls it out too far, definitely. But we've done lots of 383 strokers. We run 4-inch cranks on a 4.8, on a 5.3, and on a 6.0, and on all of them, it's just, you know, a 4.8 and a 5.3 both make the same 383 combination if you bore it over. The engine noise, probably a valve train thing, and the 4-inch stroke is as much as we go with stock sleeve length. If you want to go more than that, then you should probably sleeve the block. Charles, do you have any interest in doing a big bang on a 1.4 liter? No, because it's hard to hook up new motors to the engine dyno. I have to figure out, because like I'm going through that with the adapter on the 2.2 liter Dodge motor. So we have to do an adapter to hook it up. We have to do a custom input shaft and figure out a way to run the management system and all that. It's a lot of work to run a new kind of motor on there. And so I have lots of motors that I need to run before I need to add anything else. A turbo quad 4 would be awesome, but I have to go. Thank you guys all for showing. It's Friday night. I got to go see Lise. Thank you guys all for showing up. I hope you guys have all, I'm sure by now you guys have all taken a look at the video up on the Truck Norris versus the best cam. So which one of those is the best? You guys get to decide. And tomorrow, hope to have up the header test, 1 3/4 versus 1 7/8. So that should be good stuff. Thank you guys all for sharing your weekend with me, and I will see you guys all tomorrow.